Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited today to have author, speaker, and real estate leader, David Hoffman. David, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Tony.
Well, listen, man, I kind of love to start with the macro kind of stuff before we get into some of the weeds of your story. I always like to ask people, how would you describe the calling that God has placed on your life?
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of three Bible verses all throughout real fast that everyone knows. Proverbs 3:5-6, followed by Jeremiah 29:11, and then Romans 8:28. You have to first understand that we need to lean on Him because we can't know it all. We can't understand it all. And once we realize that, we have to be reminded that He has a plan for us and for us to prosper and not be harmed. But we can't forget that He does all things for those that love Him. And that's two men on this call and probably many others. With all that being said, one of the principles is adversity brings gratitude. And where that came from is I came from a lot of strife in my life, Tony. I came from a lot of loss and neglect. And because I didn't have relationships, I now value relationships. And so I got asked the other
Mm,
day, what made you value relationships so much? And I said, not having them. And so that adversity, while God was working through all things and I did not know it, that adversity actually gave me perspective to stay grateful for just any one relationship. I got to see my mom 3 or 4 times a year, 3 or 4 hours a time. We're talking 10 hours a year. And,
wow.
she chose life for me when she had MS and the doctors told her not to have me. And she chose life for me. And I'm grateful for that, but it made her paralyzed. And so I never got to have I had a very strong relationship with my mom, but I never got to have a substantive relationship where we had a lot of quality time, to the point where I spent a lot of time alone in my room with a lot of neglect and without the unconditional love that we know our Savior to give. And so again, like for me, my whole purpose is I've got two, my mom and Jesus, that both gave their life for me to live with sin, for me to live in this broken world and to live my life. And so I feel called to just give more than I could take, just like my mom did, just like Jesus first and foremost did to anyone that he puts in my life, man. So I'm just not attached to the outcome of if the transaction ends and I don't focus on the relationship because the relationship starts when the transaction ends, then shame on me, man. Like I just know in the marketplace where we're called to go to the next transaction. But that's not the truth. That's what the world tells us. The truth is if God puts on your life, you have to give more than you take, regardless if you ever receive. And so that's my singular focus is to focus on others, give to them, keeping God in the center.
One of the things I love to do whenever somebody sends me a book is I love to read the dedication page. And so I thought it would be good for me to read this dedication page to my podcast family and then have you reflect on it a little bit. You already mentioned your mom, and that's the first part. It says, "To Mom, for your selfless sacrifice to bring me into the world, for being my lifelong role model of gratitude and faithfulness, for giving me the motivation that drives my purpose each and every day." And then you continue, "To Jessica, Kane, and Knox, I would not have the courage to share these stories and principles with the world if it were not for my best friend and bride, Jessica, who loves and fears the Lord immensely, and whom I met the day after becoming a Christian. Jessica has been by my side through the deep valleys and the tall peaks. I hope and trust that our boys, Kane and Knox, will follow Jesus for all the days on this earth and embrace Jessica's passion for the word, which honors Proverbs 22:6, ensuring for them this truth that they will spend eternity in heaven." First of all, beautifully said. That's uh, that's a great dedication page. One of the things that made me wonder about your story is that in these two parts of this dedication page, we see very conflicting upbringings in the sense of how you're trying to raise your kids versus how you were raised.
Yeah.
And so, what does it mean to you today to be a Christian dad, not having Christian parents?
Yeah, man. And by the way, I've got a little girl now who's 10 years old.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and you're like, little girl, 10 years old. Like brand new little girl who's 10 years old. I met her the first week of June, and her name is Isabella. And God knew her decades ago. I met her in June. and she's
Mm,
ours. God has lent her to us, hopefully for all of our years here. But we have legal custody of her, man, and the boys love her, and I love her. And I took her to the daddy daughter dance back in early August, and she told me she loved
wow.
me the other night. Um, and um, and so that's the best answer I can give, man. Is that like, the world says, well, you don't have time, you don't have the budget, you don't have the bandwidth to take a stranger in. She was a stranger in early June, Tony. Um, but
Mm,
but being the salt and light, being the hands and feet, Jesus left the 99 for the one, and she needed and deserved a God fearing, God loving home. So we just answered the call. And selfishly, man, like she brings so much joy. My wife and I have been praying for a little girl. We've got two boys, our bookends. Doctors told us that my wife could never have another child. We had our boy. We had two girls that didn't make it to this side. Um, and so we had kind of gone past those days, and we were going to start looking at fostering to adopt. And then God said, yes, you heard me. Bring a girl into this world, but you're going to bring this girl. And we just said, yes, man. We just answered the call, and she's such a blessing. Um, but that question is a powerful question. And, when someone faces junk, abuse, strife in their life, and we all have had our own stories, we have a choice, right? Like we can either use that as chains, as a scarlet letter, use that as what keeps us down, or we can use that as a way to redirect God's redirection for our own protection. And I chose the latter. Honestly, Tony, it got to the point where I don't know if it almost felt normalized, or so I didn't feel bad for myself and I was no longer a victim, or if I just realized, you know what, this is a life for me, but not for anyone else, and everyone else deserves better. And so I just every day in my room, I spent a lot of time alone in my room. I couldn't leave very much. I just thought, how does someone have to live like this? I would never
mm,
want, like if I could ever be a husband, I would never want to abandon my wife. And then I can't imagine keeping my kids almost jailed in their room, where they don't have
yeah.
security and basic needs and feel love. And so far from perfect, man, but it almost trained me at 8 years old. I was, you know, raking leaves and washing cars and shoveling snow, and that gave me my work ethic. So I do believe that your adversity in your past, while it doesn't define your purpose or dictate your potential, it does give you this perspective that brings gratitude. And so I've just kind of gone the other way of the pendulum, man. Is that if I don't like how I was treated, then I need to not treat people that way. And then when I learned about Jesus, man, it makes it so much easier. Not that it's easy, not that it's easy. I fail every day at it, but He is just the ultimate moral compass for what is good and beautiful. And so I just attempt, because again, the fear of, well, if I don't work late, if I don't focus on the transaction, if I don't make it about myself and my marketplace and my business, I'm not going to have business and I won't be able to take care of my family. But I'm not worried about this side. Like I mentioned in that
Yeah.
dedication page, Proverbs 22:6, raise them up the right way so when they're old they will not depart, not raise them up the right way so when they're old they'll have filet mignon and fancy suits and a big mansion. I'm not worried about this side. I used to be, but I'm not any longer.
One of the things that you mentioned in there that I want to drill down on a little bit is this idea about God's redirection. Because in your journey, there's a lot of moments, whether it's moving to North Carolina in '05 or getting into the real estate or accepting Christ, all of these kind of moments. Um, and then since accepting Christ, you've made some pretty bold decisions in just your work and what you're doing and what, even just what you and Jessica have shared in this book are pretty big things. How do you know God's voice in your life versus like the burrito you had last night?
No, that's I giggle. I appreciate you being genuine, Tony, but it's a powerful question, man. I have these dear friends. You might know them or know of them, the Benham brothers. They actually live in my town, and they had that HGTV show that was canceled for being Christians, and they're dear brothers and friends of mine. And I'll never forget about 10 years ago, man. Like I wasn't being self righteous per se, but I was like, yeah, I always listen to Christian music when I'm driving home, when I'm driving to work. I'm always listening to worship music. I'm always listening to Christian music. I love me some Chris Tomlin. He's like, yeah, we do too. We do too, but what's your refrigerator sound like? And I'm
Mm,
like, I'm in real estate. So I was like, well, what do you mean? What does my refrigerator sound like? Hopefully it doesn't sound like anything. I hope it works. And they go, well, tonight after your kids go to bed, check your refrigerator, see what it sounds like. So 9 o'clock, man, the kids are in bed, Tony, and I text I think I just had my one son then, and I text Jason, Dave, and I said, guys, my refrigerator is pretty loud. And they're like, yeah, but it's cold inside, right? I'm like, yeah. It's like, so it's working well, but you just never heard that it was making noise. And I'm like, yeah, it's finally still. There's no chaos in the house. There's no TV or music. No one's singing or crying or laughing, cheering, but it's making noise. And they said, now you're ready to receive God's voice. And so while worship music is good, you know what is great? Being still and knowing that He is Lord. And so honestly, um, when I'm still, when there's no white noise, when I cut out the outside noise, and when I don't ask or even pray for anything in particular, Tony, and I'm just still and just being still, when I'm in the Word and just being still, it's just quiet, and I'm not asking for anything. He shows up, man, and it's been audible before. I mean, I can't tell you. I could tell you each time, and each time my wife, who is a skeptic, we joke about it. I mean, she's my other half because I'm like more optimistic. She's a little more cynical, but she's usually right. To be honest, she's like my protector. But when I tell her, when she was really sick, I said, "Babe, God said it was just for a season." When she thought she lost our little boy Knox, I said, "Babe, I was at church. She wouldn't even come because she knew she lost our baby boy." And God said, he's alive. And I came outside crying and calling her from
Mm,
the lobby, and she got mad at me. And then she stopped and she's like, wait a minute, you really did hear him, didn't you? I was like, yes, I did, babe. The next day, 165 heartbeats a minute. Now he's almost 7 years old. You know, when I got saved on Tuesday, February 24th, 2009, 2 days earlier on Sunday, Tony, I was at church, and the pastor, my first time ever, and the pastor is like, is your name David? Did you grow up in New York? Did you have a lack of love? Did you feel neglected? Are you Jewish? Are you in real estate? Is your last name Hoffman? I mean, like literally, I was like, wait a minute, there's like 2,000 people here. Are you only talking to me? Like, do you have a security system in my house?
wow.
And that night I heard God for the first time. And He said, you've tried it your way long enough. Give it to me. And so then Tuesday at lunch, Tony, I'm sitting with my dear friend Justin. And Justin looks at me with a Bible in hand and he goes, David, you've tried it your way long enough. Give it to God.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh my gosh. I start crying. He's like, are you okay? He's like, man, God spoke to me Sunday. He's like, what did He say? He's like, you just told me what He said. He's like, really? God has put that on my heart to tell you. And I was like, and I started crying, Tony. And I was just like, I'm tired, man. I'm tired. I always try to do good works. I try to just do the right things. I'm always trying to be a good person. It's never enough, man. And he's like, it won't be enough. And he's like, but you know what is enough? And he just started in the beginning of the Bible, man, with Genesis. And then he started telling me about our Jesus. And I gave my life. The next day, I took a very famous wrestler for his 60th birthday to a restaurant, and the limo driver started hitting on this young lady at the bar. She ended up becoming my wife. Um, and so it's funny how God works. But and so I really do believe, Tony, that when we say like, why is God making it so hard? Like, why won't God just fix this? Why won't God just heal that? Well, maybe we're asking for Him to detour Him away from His plan when He needs us to detour us away from our plan. And because when we listen to Him, He makes it easy. My pastor loves to say it takes more faith sometimes to not believe. To not believe that all these beautiful things in this perfect universe, it all just runs flawlessly with the sun, not too close, not too far. When you have kids and a wife and everything that's going, you're like, okay, it's all on me. When it's not working, it's on God. When it is working, it's on us. Well, like He told Job, like, where the air in your lungs come from, where the gifts in your hands, where the muscle come from. So I just give it all to Him nowadays, man.
I love that. And I want to push just a little bit because you're clearly New York hustle. You got fight in you. Like it just drips, right? So like I believe that you trust God with all your heart and soul and your whole life. And it's clearly God is speaking to you. But like also you clearly work, right? Like you work at it, you fight, right? You fight for what's important. The whole kind of idea of the book is about fighting for relationships and being intentional in those relationships. how do you know when is the right time to be like, I'm leaning into hard work and obedience, or I'm sitting back and I'm waiting? Because I know that there's somebody listening right now who's like,
Yes,
I
yes.
don't know what the next to do this next season. What's God want me to do? Do I lean in or do I sit back?
Yeah, man. This is going to sound airy fairy, so I apologize in advance, but I have to do it. But you know, you know, when you're pushing and you're frustrated and you're pushing and you're discouraged and you're pushing and you're crying, that might be God saying, "Stop pushing." I'm a big fan of work ethic. Uh,
Hmm.
I'm a big fan of hard work and grit. And for me, it's easy, not because it's easy, but because it is. Because I never want to go back to no relationships. I never want someone to feel the way I did, and I never want to feel that way. So both ends of the spectrum, right? Like, and for me, I don't mind the hard work because the alternative is nowhere near as bad as what I came from. And so I have nothing to lose, and everything to gain. I can't wait to meet Jesus. Can't wait to see my mom again out of a wheelchair. I'm sure you know this in the book that I was on the phone with my mom. I said I was going to visit her, and then she died. And that regret of not saying goodbye to my mom, I will live with, but I'll learn from because I did not know my purpose then. But what I want to encourage people that are discouraged, either they're hoping and praying for something or they're trying really hard and it's not working, is just let it go.
Yeah.
Let it go for an hour or even a day or even a week, Tony. Like just let it go and just be still or go to the mountaintop, take a trip. More importantly, just go back to being still, like we talked about earlier. Just let it go. When I finally let it go, that's when I started receiving because it's a worldly expression. And so I did not agree with that God doesn't give you more than you can handle. It is true, God doesn't give you anything bad. We have free will, but we receive more than we can handle, which is why we need to lean on Him. And
Yeah.
so we're holding on so tight. We're trying to bench press 400 pounds and it's just not moving. When we're trying to make something work, either a relationship that maybe he doesn't want there anymore, or a job that we're really fighting for the promotion, or we're trying to save something. Now, if it's a marriage, you give everything you got and you ask God to fill in the gaps. And if it's a child, everything you got and ask God to fill in the gaps. But when it comes to anything that you feel like you can do in your own works that's just not working, you just have to let go and give it to God because either He needs you to let Him fill in the gaps or His redirections for your protection. A lot of times, Tony, a lot of times I really do believe that we hold on so tight, we fight so hard thinking it's His plan for us. And if we just stop for a moment, and when I say a moment, it might be a week or a month, maybe even a year, and just ask God to take it off our heart. I've done that before. I've actually asked God, God, if this is not your will, just take it off my heart.
Right.
I'm letting this go. Like if it's your will, it'll be done. But if it's not, it's out of my control. Like I'm giving this to you. I've tried. I'm tired. And so for the people listening, for my new friends, I just want to encourage you that you're not alone. You're not alone because you have Jesus, but you're also not alone because you have others. You have brothers and sisters that care about you, and you have people in your life that love you. And so beware the snare to compare. Just because someone else seems to be further along in their journey, we don't know what they're fighting behind the scenes. But if someone's struggling, I want to encourage that Jesus struggled and suffered, and we are
Hmm.
called to suffer. He doesn't want us to suffer, but we live on a broken world because of the garden. And so the best we can do when we're struggling is be still and talk to Him, and that's it.
Yeah.
Just like our daddy. When you're a child, for those that did have dads in their life, even if they didn't, you have a heavenly Father. Just lean on Him. Just say like, "Look, I can't do this alone. I need you, Father. I need you," and just ask Him. Um, and honestly, when you fully surrender, Tony, I feel like that's when He says, "Okay." He said, "Okay, I've always been working, but now I'm gonna hit you over the head with love and grace, and I'm gonna make this clear that I'm here." But we have to be still. Just like I couldn't hear the refrigerator with my son crying and me talking about this that, and the other, and the noise on the TV, even worship music. I couldn't hear the refrigerator. If you can't
Hmm.
hear your refrigerator in your kitchen, how are you going to hear your heavenly Father at nighttime? or in your car ride. And so you have to be still. I just want to encourage. I want to encourage both ends of the spectrum. One, that we need to be still and know that He is Lord and lean on Him. And two, we are called to suffer. Sometimes when things are going too well, I spend time alone in the Word, Tony, and I ask God what is going to happen next. Because I live in 3 minutes and 3 years. 3 minutes, you and I and the listeners. And then I fast forward 3 years so that, like, I live in Charlotte. If I'm going to Florida, I know I'm going to be in Disney World in 9 hours. How I get there may change with detours and pivots and restroom stops and bathroom breaks, but I know that I'm going to end up in Disney World. So you have to have the end in sight, 3 years. And
Sure.
so I'm not attached to tonight or tomorrow, man. I'm not attached to tonight or tomorrow. So if it's too hard, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to let it go. I'm not going to pivot immediately. I'm not going to quickly like drive a different way to Disney World, but I may pull over and say, let's get some lunch. Let's take a break. Let's let the storm pass. Let's let this hurricane pass. Let's let the rain pass. And then when the break is over, hopefully the clouds have parted. Um, just leave time for God to work.
I love everything that you said there, and I absolutely agree, and I hear. And also, you've said an expression that I wrote down that I've never heard before, and that is airy fairy. That's amazing. Does that just mean like soft, like kind of like how would you define? I just
Yeah.
listen. I love sticky words, right? Like I'm a words guy. I'm a podcaster. Like, what does that airy fairy? I love that.
Yeah. So the first time I heard it, I thought it was kind of like a insult because I was on like this big stage, man, and like the host was when I was done was like, or in the beginning, I heard it and then he said it again. 'Cause I thought it was like a mistake, like maybe 6 years ago. He's like, "This guy is not airy fairy." At the end, he's like, "Guys, was that airy fairy?" No, it was not. And so I was like, asked where I was like, "Hey, what does airy fairy mean?" And I had to look it up too. It's confirmed. He said like corny, full of fluff, no
Oh, I
substance.
love it. It's so good. It's so
Yeah.
good.
Well, if you think about it, when you think about it, when we talk about relationships, it's like, oh, that's airy fairy, like love at first sight, like you're the one for me. It kind of sounds airy fairy.
Yeah.
Just care about people, Tony. Just give more than you take. Just make it about others, and just all these cliches. But that's like Jesus, right? That is our God.
Right.
So it's not
Yeah.
airy.
It's practical.
It's practical. It's substantive. Like it's actually
Yeah.
deep. But the world doesn't want it to be. The world wants you to just focus on, well, I need to make a lot of money today so I can focus on my family tomorrow. So next week I can give to others. And that's what the devil will just keep telling you. Don't focus on your marriage this week because you got to focus on your business. Don't focus on your kids next week. You have to focus on your business. One day you'll be able to focus on your marriage and your kids and your church and your community. But right now, you have to build and build it for your own family. You're doing it for your wife. You're doing it for your kids. The devil will just tell you whatever
Right.
lie he wants you to hear.
One of the things that's interesting about the book is that you and Jessica both share, or you share Jessica's story and your story, and it's full of like really personal, deep trauma, right? If there's and people should pick up the book to really dive into it. But the question I have is more about, you've obviously been speaking now for a while, and you're sharing your story in the book, and you're sharing your story in a lot of different places. How do you know when it's the right time to share something
That's
that
great.
is traumatic?
Man, that's the $1 million question. I'll tell you what. My writer, Robert Nolan, amazing writer. He wrote the book I Can Only Imagine, became a movie, a song, and everything of Mercy Me. He did the lead singer Bart Mercy Me's memoir. He did
Hmm.
Moneyball. He did Michael W. Smith's memoir for his father. Amazing Christian pastor, award-winning writer. He said, David, about a year and a half ago, he said, David, I always read the book back to my author. And the agent likes to be there too, so we can just change everything because you hear it differently, you receive it differently. He said, would you like to do that? And he lives in Franklin, Tennessee. And I said, oh, I'd be honored. So I did that about a year ago, Tony. And we're listening to it, like Robert read it. And my agent looks at me, he's like, David, there's some real stuff here. There's some real abuse here. Like, I've read your book, it's beautiful, but I'm hearing it now, and Robert's like, "Oh yeah, there's a lot here," and I'm like, "Where are we going with this, guy?" He's like, "Should this not be published?" It's like, "No, no, 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 no." I just want to let you know this is heavy, and you're going to help many. You're going to save lives, but just know, you may lose a person or two who's not happy that this is being told. And I asked him, I said, should this not be there? Like, no, the devil wants you not to put this there. The devil wants you to keep this
Mm,
bile inside for your own trauma. The devil doesn't want you to save others. And so two things. One, that was encouraging that, it's going to encourage others who have their own junk, who have their own strife in their life, who've gone through their own challenges, to be encouraged that their past is not define their purpose or dictate their potential. But then when it moves forward, you know, I was doing a TV show this morning, and I did it via Zoom. And because sometimes I'll go on the road, Tony, but sometimes I need to be home for my wife and kids. And and I wasn't going to talk about anything with trauma or anything. I wasn't. And one of the last questions from the host was, someone watching today, guy David, someone watching today is struggling. Someone watching today, and I'm paraphrasing, but she said, someone watching today is really hurting. They're facing difficult stuff today or last week. They're hurting, and they can't imagine that a good God would let them be hurt so bad. And the
yeah.
way she said it made me realize, I've served on a board for domestic violence for many years, and I was never ever touched. But neglect is a different version form. But it made me realize that, what, it's not about me. It's my story for His glory. And it reminded me of about 6 months ago. My wife was asking me if I was getting excited about the book coming out and getting some good attention around it, like God was using it. And I said, babe, I'm not that excited, to be honest, because I feel like I sound like a victim, and like I have so much more than I deserve. And she said, babe, it's interesting you say that, because I just heard a song today for the first time, and it made me think of your book from Matthew West, My Story, Your Glory. And so
Mm,
at the end of the day, Tony, yes, I pray on this 10 times a day. How do you live as a victor if you're always talking about challenge in your past? How do you look forward if you're still looking back? And what I want to encourage people is that everyone has a story, and you choose what to do with it. And so you can use your story to be a victim, or you can use your story to be a victor for His glory. And so I guess the best answer is, more than not, I do share, and then I
mm.
use it to glorify Him and to show all that has come. I'll tell you, just making light of it. A few months ago, my older son was complaining that the sirloin was not filet, and at the dinner table. Yeah, man. I mean, it's funny today. And I was so mad at him. And so I pulled out a can of dog food, because we have a little Yorkie, and I said, I'm going to eat it. And my wife's like, please don't, babe. And I was like, no, I can eat it, because I have that perspective that I used to eat the dry stuff in the basement because it wasn't being counted. And so she laughed. She's like, babe, please don't do it. And my son was like, you're going to eat that? It's disgusting. I'm like, yeah, but I've done. And my wife goes, he's done it before. He can do it again. And I could, and it would be perfectly fine. But I just wanted my son to understand. He's sitting there complaining about sirloin, and there's little kids being murdered in Israel. This was before then, obviously, but it's just all perspective. And so I'm grateful for the gifts of perspective that I received through adversity. Um, and so I feel comfortable and confident sharing more and more, because it's not about me. If someone doesn't want to
Yeah.
work with me, if someone doesn't want to hire me, if someone doesn't like me because something I say either seems too real or raw, or they can't relate, then that's not, but I'm trying, my goal is just to share my story for His glory.
Yeah, you brought up an interesting point. You were raised in a very adverse situation. That adversity was a huge catalyst to where you are today, and now you have, by all accounts, reached incredible levels of success. Your kids will never know adversity like that. How much struggle do you put on the boys and Isabella when it comes to like leaning in to like, hey, I need to make your life a little harder or else you're not going to appreciate and be tough like I am? Like, what's the tension there for you?
Oh, that's great, man. You ask great questions. You should start a podcast, man. So
Thank you. Subscribe.
I definitely will today. This is awesome, man. And no, all can aside, there's two different things. One is it can't be taught; it has to be caught. So I do hope that I walk with that intentionality.
Mm,
I'm shutting lights off around the house. I'm I'm not wasting food. I'm reusing old Ziploc bags, and I'm reusing old shirts. Like I'll wear the same hat for 10 years. I'll wear the same jeans for 20. I'm just grateful in the little things, right? Because I'm used to,
Yeah.
and I'll do that in front of the kids. Like if they're not done eating, I'll eat their food on their plate. Like I try to show them that to be grateful in the little things, like not to waste. Um, and I'll tell them why I'm doing it. I'm like, look, there's kids around this world that don't even have one cup of water that you just wasted. Like you don't like the flavored Gatorade, so you poured it out. There's kids that haven't had that much water today or this week, for that matter. And so that's one side of it. Is it can't be taught us to be caught, Tony. So just the way I'm attempting to honor, not hoard by any means. I don't want to be an
Sure.
Israelite hoarding the manna, but just being grateful for it, and just answering the call of, like, let's go an extra step, let's help our neighbor. But then also, all three got baptized recently. Two of the three go to, the boys go to a Christian school. Isabella leads almost all meals in prayer. And so even though they may not face adversity, and I don't want them to, obviously, they are learning the word, man. Like they are learning how to be,
Yeah.
so they're actually, so, they're learning it the right way, right? Like they're actually, that's why I put in there, my wife, in Proverbs 22:6, because they're being raised the right way. And not of how to be good works, but with grace, and being more like Jesus. And they're just great kids, man. Like my older son, he's got lots of energy. He's really hyper. And but but when he starts getting tired, he starts singing Christian music, and the other two already do that. So all three of them are always singing these beautiful hymns, and they're singing
Mm.
songs, and they're just good kids, man. They just have the right moral compass and the right priorities. And my older son, his friend sent him a song the other day that he was playing. He wanted to play in the car. I played it. It had a bad word. He looked at me shocked. He's like, "Dad, is that the word I think it is?" I looked it up. I'm like, "Yeah, but never again." He's like, "I'm so sorry, Dad. That's a horrible word. I can't believe, they know right from wrong already." And so I used to be worried about that entitlement piece, but to be honest, now I'm more worried about the negative influences from the culture of the world. Um, but yeah, I think they're in the right track. Their mom has loved the Lord her entire life.
Man, I've got to. I know it was a good conversation because I got like 1,000 questions I didn't get to ask. But I do have one more big question for you. But before I ask it, I know that my podcast family is going to want to connect with you all over the interwebs. Where is the best place to learn all things David Hoffman? Pick up their copy of the book to follow about what God is doing in your life.
Yeah, definitely. I've got a website, relationshipsoverrules.com. And then I don't do too much social media, but I do have a public Facebook page that I have been doing more and more with, and they can add me on that public page and message me. Um, you know, I would love to talk to anyone. Like that would be encouraging for me more
Mm-hmm.
than you. For anyone listening who's going through anything tough, anyone struggling in their marriage or in the marketplace with their kids, in their community. I want to help, not because I have all the answers, because I have many of the mistakes, and because I'm willing to drop my guard, and we can, break bread and sharpen iron together.
I love that. You're also you got a LinkedIn page too. We'll put that both of those things in the show notes, and that way people can connect with you on multiple platforms. Okay, last question. I always love to ask people. It's an advice question, except I get to take you back in time and ask you to give yourself one piece of advice. And I name the season of life that you're in.
Okay.
So I want to take you back to your very first day in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's 2005. You're here. You just moved here. You're a young man. You're full of ambition, vigor, probably working ridiculously hard to build a real estate empire. If you could go back in time and pull up a chair in front of that younger version of yourself, sit knee to knee with him, hold his hands, and look him in the eye, what's the one piece of advice that you're going to give him now?
This is going to sound airy fairy again, man. I have to do it to you.
I love it. It's
I
good.
I have to do it to you. Um, I thought you were going to say pick a time. You know, if you would have said pick a time, I would have said make the trip a
Mm.
week earlier to see my mom. But my first day in Charlotte, man, I'd love to say give my life to get saved 4 years earlier. But his plan, his plan is the right plan, because if I would have given my life 4 years earlier, I wouldn't have married a young lady after buying a home next door to Ric Flair, who became like my best friend, who I took ended up getting divorced from my ex-wife, and then taking him out for his birthday and meeting my bride, who's the mom of my 3 kids. And so, you know, I can't change God's plan for my life. And so I don't know what advice I could have given myself that day. Now, if you would have rewound it a year and 5 months earlier to DC when I'm on the phone with my mom, the advice I would have given myself is, which I take all the time now, man, is if you commit to something on the calendar, you follow through outside of personal emergency. I would have got off that phone and I would have booked a flight for the next day, and I would have spent time with my mom,
Mm.
and she would have still passed a few weeks later, but I would have had that precious time with her that I could never take back. You know, I'll tell you a quick story that I learned from that one. You know, I was speaking in Sacramento. I've spoken in Sacramento twice around the pandemic, and I live on the other side of the country. About 4 years ago, I spoke in Sacramento, and the morning I woke up in Charlotte, I had a direct flight, Tony. I was sick of the dog. I had either COVID before COVID was known or mono. I was horrible. My wife's like, "You can't get on a plane." I was like, "I have to, because I've got an event tonight and I've got a big talk in front of 400 people tomorrow at a big church, and it's a real estate company doing it at a church." And so I got on the plane. I mean, I was too much information. I was throwing up left and right on the plane, like in the bathroom. It was
Oh, wow.
horrible. I didn't even have a direct. Actually, I had to fly through Phoenix. It was horrible. I got there. I was soaking wet. Now, they didn't know, because after it was over, they asked me to come back. So I came back, but the pandemic started. And so I came back a few months ago. And I told them when they asked me to come back, I'm like, when they called me, Tony, about 6 months ago, I said, "Hey, do you know how sick I was last time I came?" And the host goes, "No, you did awesome." I was like, "Really? Can you imagine how I don't know if maybe I was better because I was sick." So it's time to go back. And if I put it on the calendar, I got to keep it. So I'm on the plane in Charlotte, and I'm going to fly through Houston. This is about 3 months ago. And the flight attendant, I got an hour delay. I have an hour layover in Houston. And the flight attendant says, "Hey, we got a 30-minute delay." I'm like, "Okay, I still got about 20, 30 minutes. It's going to be tight, but there's nothing I can do right now." Then the pilot gets on and says, "Hey, it might be a little bit longer. We have an overflow of hydraulic fluid." Long story short, I hear overflow of hydraulic fluid. I'm getting off that plane and going home. But I can't go home because I have to get to Sacramento. So I still deplane. Now, no one ever voluntarily deplanes. You know, even though Waze tells everyone that everyone's going right, so you go left, right? If traffic is right, accidents are right, you go left. I want to encourage people that if everyone's going one way, you go the other. That's why Jesus was on the cross, because no one followed. You know, not enough people followed him. I deplane, and there's all this paperwork you have to do. I mean, the flight attendants were shocked I was deplaning. They said, "It's really stupid." I jumped on my phone, Tony, and I booked another flight for like $600, really expensive, with another airline that got me direct to Sacramento at midnight.
Wow.
But 20 years earlier, almost to the day, I told my mom I was going to come visit her, and I didn't get there in time. And so now I don't care how sick I am. I don't care how many flights I have to book, how much money I have to spend. If I commit to something, I'm going to follow through with it. And that was a lesson I learned. So that's, if I can tell my earlier self anything, maybe that advice I would have given my first day in Charlotte was, don't take something off your calendar for something else that the world says is better, maybe a bigger listing, a more important person, someone who's more high profile, the world says is more important. No, if I put someone in your life, you keep them in your life. If you commit to something, you follow through.
Hmm.
Um, and and um, and I didn't receive that until I got saved. So that's probably the best advice I can give myself that first day in Charlotte is, if you commit to the calendar, you're going to follow through no matter what. No one else is more important than who God's already put in your life.
Come on. I love it, dude. Hey, this has been such a rich time. I'm so thankful for you. I would love to have you back on at some point, maybe early 2024. And I would love to bring Jessica too. I think she's got a story that needs to be told as well. And so anything we can do with that. But I just want to say thank you for your generosity of time and for putting your heart out there in the world in this book.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate you, man. Let's do it.